Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Pullman Police Advisory Committee. I am Stephanie Rink, the chair. We are going to start with roll call. On my left, Dr. Macon, would you like to?
Isabella Macon, high school representative.
Krista Gross at large.
Christina Richardson, WSU representative.
Melissa Painter, WSU staff and faculty.
Barbara Hammond, College Hill.
Craig Watt at large.
Adam Williams, Sunnyside.
Eric Tetzoff, business.
Phyllis Stahlkopf, Sunnyside Hill.
Carol Lambuki, substitute multicultural.
Jake Opgenorth, Police Chief.
Wonderful, thank you. So next up is our approval of the minutes from October 10th. Does anybody have any comments, revisions?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. Next up, we have the Palouse Area Law Enforcement Critical Incident Response Team, our presentation by Detective Engel. Please come to the podium.
Good evening. Oh, everybody hear me okay? That's going to have to be how it is. So I'm Chris Engel. I'm a sergeant with the Pullman Police Department. I'm currently assigned to the detectives unit. And so I oversee that unit and also our contribution to the Palouse Area Law Enforcement Critical Incident Investigative Response Team, which is just getting started. So I want to talk to you tonight about officer-involved deadly force investigations. So this is officer-involved shootings. This is typically what we are looking at in this. I do want to warn you that the subject matter can be a little bit intense. I'm not going to show you anything that's graphic or anything, but just fair warning. It is a contentious and difficult issue. I want to talk a little bit about, if my slide moves forward here. Click. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the history of officer use of force, especially deadly force, and the kind of the contentious incidents and the civil unrest that can occur, has occurred and for the lengthy past in some of these incidents. This really started, it's kind of always been a facet of policing and the interaction between policing and communities. These are all incidents in the past in the United States where an officer use of force and the perception of that being wrong, illegal, unfair, all those things led to, significant civil unrest. As you can see, this dates back to the labor movements, at the end of the 19th century and early 20th century. Even the Illinois Crime Survey in 1929 is an interesting topic. This is one of the first times that it was documented that there was particularly disparate outcomes in the experiences of Black Americans versus white Americans in Illinois, where they found, this is back in 1929, they're finding that, whereas the Black Americans in Illinois at that time were 5% of the population, they were still 30% of the people that officers were shooting and using deadly force upon. So this is something that's been going on for a long, long time. None of this is particularly new, unfortunately. And it's kind of a facet of American policing. Going through that list, we go through the civil rights era, go through even the gay rights era, and on into particularly a focus in Los Angeles riots in '92, the Rodney King, and the Oakland riots of 2010, where really we're starting to focus on particular incidents where a high-level officer use of force or lethal force is really getting focused on by large portions of the community, and basically the lack of trust in that process is leading to civil unrest. On August 9th of 2014, you will probably all be familiar with this, but this is really what I would call our sentinel event when it comes to officer-involved shooting investigations and a national focus and change in community expectations about how we handle this and how we investigate it.
There is growing outrage tonight after an unarmed African-American teenager was shot and killed by police in the St. Louis suburb of Ferguson, Missouri. But there are conflicting reports about what led up to the shooting. NBC's John Yang has the details.
On the streets of Ferguson, Missouri, outrage and anger. No justice! No peace! Protesters of different ages and races demanding answers in the shooting death of 18-year-old Michael Brown at the hands of a policeman. Investigators said at about noon Saturday, the officer, who hasn't been identified, encountered Brown and another man on the street in an apartment complex. There was a struggle, and one of the men pushed the officer into his car.
Within the police car, there was a struggle over the officer's weapon. There was at least one shot fired within the car.
The struggle spilled out onto the street, where Brown, whom investigators say was not armed, was fatally shot.
Police shot this man for no reason.
Piaget Crenshaw, who took the cell phone video, says she saw those shots from her apartment balcony.
He's running this way. He turns his body towards this way, hands in the air, being compliant. He gets shot in his face and chest and goes down and dies.
Witnesses said Brown's body lay in the street for hours.
I'd like everybody here to appreciate that it took a very long time yesterday to process this scene.
The shooting sparked a furious reaction. Police responded in force, brandishing assault rifles.
Give us the serenity to understand things.
Michael Brown graduated from high school earlier this spring and was to begin college next week. His mother, Leslie McSpadden, has a message for the officer who killed him.
You're not God. You don't decide when you're going to take somebody from her. If that was the case, I brought him her. I should have took him from her. That was mine. That belonged to me.
Here at the spot where Michael Brown was killed, hundreds still gathering, with calls for an even bigger rally tomorrow at the police station.
And I'm sure you all know what happened after this, the beginning of this incident. That was not the end, obviously, of that particular incident. I'm sorry for the presentation view here. Following, the first days of that incident, it drug on. Even weeks and months afterwards, eventually when the officer was not charged, this major amount of civil unrest occurred for a protracted period of time. The reason this is, I call this the sentinel event for this subject is because this is really the first time that not only did a community respond, in this way, with civil unrest and anger and emotions boiling over, but the entire country focused on this one issue, at one time, and it stuck. It wasn't something that just kind of went away eventually, or some investigation into the findings, settled things down. This was something that continued on and on and on, and really truly takes us into where we are now. The other issue is that I would say it was probably the first time that one incident and then the investigation into that incident particularly created a schism between Americans, where you had some Americans saying, well, this is the set of facts that we're looking at, and another set of Americans saying, no, this is the set of facts. You're not even operating on the same set of facts. And that was due to the distrust in the investigation itself. So it brings up the topic of legitimacy in policing, and the legitimacy of these investigations is what supports or detracts from the legitimacy of the policing institution itself. And so what do we mean when we talk about legitimacy? We're really talking, people expect a legitimate institution is competent, they know what they're doing the right things. It's objective, they're not looking at this from a biased lens, or at least as much as is humanly possible, and that it's free of conflicts. So it's not benefiting one group over another, it's not benefiting special interests or friends or anything like that. That's what the public expects from a legitimate institution. So in Washington, as a response to the Michael Brown shooting, as well as many other shootings, citizens groups, in particular De-Escalate Washington and the Puyallup tribe, got together and they put together Initiative 940. Initiative 940 was filed with the legislature to establish higher training requirements and police accountability standards. That was really the intent of the thing. There were many goals and effects from this. The one that we'll focus on today is requiring a completely independent investigation into officer-involved uses of deadly force. That wasn't a new thing, but it was a new requirement. It was passed by a vote of the people in November 2018. And when it passed, it became LEXA. I still have trouble pronouncing this, the Law Enforcement Training and Community Safety Act. So, LETSCA got codified in particular two places, our RCWs, Revised Code of Washington, and under 10.114.010, or excuse me, 011, it requires that any time a deadly force by a peace officer results in death, substantial bodily harm, or great bodily harm, then you have to do an independent investigation. And the investigation must be completely independent of the agency whose officer was involved in the use of deadly force. So previously, most agencies had some sort of mechanism to have somebody else investigate, so it wasn't just them. But this legislation required essentially that the agency couldn't have any part in that investigation whatsoever. The WAC was adjusted by CJTC, Criminal Justice Training Commission in Washington, to say that the investigation has to be independent, transparent, focused on community and credibility. So you have to have the addition of community representatives to the independent investigation team was a major focal point for this. This is kind of basically the oversight mechanism. Training and experience requirements for law enforcement members of the IIT, so specific standards that the investigators had to meet to do the work. Certification of the IIT lead investigators. Information about the role of the involved agency as far as what that agency is expected to do, and details regarding how investigation information will be shared with the public. So previous to this, it was all up to each agency to figure all this out on their own. We used to be part of the Spokane Investigative Incident Response Team, and shortly before this came out, this legislation came out, Spokane said, yeah, you know, we're really not wanting to do this for any more people than we have to, any more agencies we have to, and so we had to go our own way and figure something out of our own. And so that's where PALCERT came to be, the Palouse Area Law Enforcement Critical Incident Investigative Response Team. This is a team essentially comprised of 11 agencies in Whitman County, Garfield County, and Asotin County. Pullman PD, Whitman County Sheriff, Washington State Patrol, Clarkson PD, Asotin County, WSU PD, Colfax PD, Garfield County Sheriff, Fish and Wildlife. They do have officers that operate in this area, City of Palouse PD, and the City of Asotin PD. So the goals of PALCERT are to improve the legitimacy of policing using the 5 independent investigative principles. These are independence, transparency, communication, a credible process, again, speaking to competence, and credible investigators, so competence. Leverage technology to maximize professionalism and transparency. So with this, we're talking about both technology in procedures, being up to date, and using the best procedures available, and also in equipment, you know, actual physical technology. Thorough, timely, and independent investigations. And lastly, to provide an independent investigation of facts for the prosecuting attorney to review of whatever jurisdiction this happened in. That's the final work product of this team. So PALCERT has a list of responsibilities for the involved agency and then also the team itself. The involved agency still maintains a role even after the incident. They're required to secure and maintain the scene, locate and preserve evidence that's fleeting, they call it evanescent evidence, identify and obtain contact information of witnesses. Again, this is all fleeting information that may not be available to investigators once they are able to show up. Document the scene for evidentiary location. You notice something that's hanging out there, we want them to point it out. Locate and identify witnesses and their locations. Make all information available to the investigators. all personnel and equipment resources available to investigators, and assign a liaison. So somebody that's going to be the one that is responsible for relaying information. The investigative team has to assign investigators, obviously, and supervisors, takes over control of the crime scene where the incident occurred, documents that, does all the other investigative things. Preserve evidence, analyze evidence, interview witnesses. Communicating with the family of the subject of the use of deadly force is a new thing. That's not something that necessarily would have been done by investigators in the past. Oftentimes that would be something that would be handled by the coroner's office, because that's what they would do in any other case. And this, under this formula, this set of regulations, it puts the onus on the investigators to go make that contact and be able to provide that, some level of transparency and credibility to the family. The investigators then also do the press releases, so initial press release, an intermediate press release, and then once everything's finally all in and the investigation's fully closed, they do a conclusory press release. And then, of course, complete reports and come up with that final work product that we send off to the prosecuting attorney for review. PALCERT, not all 11 agencies have equal role. There is a board of directors which governs the team. Stoughton County, Clarkson PD, Garfield County, Pullman PD, Whitman County, WSP, and WSU PD are all part of the board. So the board appoints a team commander and then meets at least annually. They can meet more often than that if the team commander or the chair call a meeting for some reason. And that's pretty much what the board does. That's the end of it. The agency heads have some responsibilities as well. They have to nominate investigators and team supervisors. So the agency heads, in a way, pick who they want to be on the team, but it's just a nomination process. They don't have the final say. The agency heads also appoint at least 2 community representatives, and that's per agency. And there's really 2 roles to focus on within the team itself that are relevant. The team commander, obviously, selects the team members, so they're the ones making the choice. They got to make sure the team members, fulfill all of the obligations of training levels and all that, meet the standard. They manage team readiness and training, as you would imagine. And they create, train, and enforce information firewalls. So in an officer-involved shooting investigation, they bifurcate the investigation into 2 sides. There's an administrative side, which is the agency's responsibility, and the criminal investigation side, which is the team's responsibility. There's lots of detail about all of that I won't go into, but basically you don't want information going from the administrative side to the criminal side because they may be privy to some information that the criminal side would not. The commander also reviews conflict statements. So after any one of these incidents, when investigators are assigned, they all have to fill out a conflict form, either saying these are the potential conflicts that I would have with this investigation. Maybe they know the officer that's involved, right? Maybe they were trained by that officer, or whatever thing may come out. Maybe there's pending civil litigation between the investigator and the subject of use of force. All sorts of things are possible. So every investigator has to complete a conflict form immediately when they're assigned to each investigation. The commander then reviews that to make sure that there's not a significant conflict of interest. The commander then also provides weekly updates on the investigation, approves special equipment, and those sorts of things. The community representatives have a really important role. They interview the agency's nominees. So I was saying that the agency heads don't have final say over who gets to be on the team. The community representatives have a significant role in that. So every team member has to be interviewed by a panel of these community representatives that are selected by the agency heads. And then they would recommend team members. Again, it's the commander's job to make that final selection, but they are supposed to take the community representatives' input in and give that heavy consideration. The community representatives have to abide by non-disclosure agreements until the end of judicial action. So they are privy to all sorts of information that is not public. And this is in their oversight capacity, right? These representatives are essentially the oversight mechanism for the team that is the public portion of that. They also review conflict statements to make sure that there's no conflicts of interest between the investigators, and appear at involved agency briefings. They get to review the investigative file, so the community representatives actually get the completed investigative file so that they can fulfill their oversight duties. They receive media releases and review notice of involved agency equipment use. This last piece is a little bit hard to kind of put into context because it wouldn't seem like the equipment itself is a big deal, but there's all sorts of things that could come along with that would create a conflict. So basically they're just there to make sure that if the involved agency is loaning equipment, that there's somebody looking over that and making sure that it's appropriate. The community representatives selection of who these people end up being is governed by the WAC here, Washington Administrative Code 139.12.030. And so the primary the primary qualification that's most important is that the community representatives have to have credibility with and ties to communities impacted by police use of deadly force. The whole point of these community representatives is, besides the oversight, who is it that is most likely to have the biggest concerns, right? What communities are most likely to have the biggest concerns with the investigation? Who is least likely to trust the investigation, right? What communities are least likely to trust the investigation? Whoever the community representatives are, they must have credibility with those communities. Otherwise, what's the point, right? What are we even doing here? We haven't made any progress from where we were, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So in order to select the community representatives, the chiefs, the agency heads have to create a transparent process for soliciting names and creating a roster of individuals willing to serve. And they have to do that with community members. So that the chief can't, the WAC requires that the chief doesn't just come up with this on their own. They have to consult with community members to come up with this transparent process and identify these individuals. And there shall be standardized trainings for the community representatives to go through, including training on the requirements for NDAs, basically. So I presume everybody knows what is being expected. Questions?
I'm curious. I know in my familiarity, I'm going to call generally misconduct for police gets investigated by the WSP. How does that relate to connect or intersect with this organization?
So the PaleCert team only deals with an officer-involved use of deadly force that results in serious bodily harm or greater. So that's it. Other criminal investigations involving misconduct that is not use of force oriented would be up to each agency head to decide how to handle. In theory, an agency head could say, "No, we'll do it ourselves." That's definitely not the standard. Although in bigger agencies, that can be something that occurs more often. Certainly for smaller agencies such as ourselves, the standard and the expectation is that you're going to look outward to another agency and ask them to do the investigation for you. So the State Patrol could become involved in an investigation like that.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Okay.
So when did PaleCert come into existence here, or established?
So it was signed into existence in July of 21.
And has it conducted any investigations so far?
No.
Okay.
Sure.
So since it was signed a year ago, we're trying to get caught up and get so that we are following these rules. So that's why I asked Sergeant Engel to come and do this presentation today. And I also felt that this is a good community group that I can turn to in all transparency and say, if you are interested or know somebody that would be interested in serving as a community representative, that we are interested in filling 2 positions right now. We're currently, all of our detectives are currently going through training this week. So, and I know we're having a board meeting coming up soon. So we're quickly trying to get where we should already be. But this was one of the hurdles, was finding community representatives. Also, is there other requirements of community representatives as far as being on call and things like that you mentioned?
Yeah, so they have to, whoever's chosen has to be willing to be on call, and they also have to be willing to have their names on a public list. So all investigators on these teams have their names on a public list that's accessible at the CJTC website. And then the community representatives are also part of that.
Chief, if there's anybody who's interested, how would they communicate with you or Darby?
So if you or you know anybody that's interested, if you could just send Darby an email, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
When do you need that by?
I don't have a due date, just as soon as possible.
End of Friday. So is that the 18th? Okay, so 5 p.m. Friday, 18th. Thank you, Sergeant Engel.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Okay, next we have Commander Brashears with our CART team presentation.
Okay. We're not going to use a computer. So what I'm here to talk to you about, and for those of you who don't know me, my name is Aaron Brashears. I'm the operations commander for the Pullman Police Department. I'm going to be moving around a lot during this, so hopefully the mics can pick these things up. I'm going to be moving a lot. So I'm here to talk about what our CART team is. And CART is short for the Chemical Agent Response Team. And essentially what you would envision that being is when you see on TV when there are riots and there are large crowds and the police is there and you see someone launching tear gas. That would be the role of CART within our department. That's just one of their roles. But that's a good example for you to kind of envision what is actually happening. Our CART team, I'll give you a little bit of history on kind of how we ended up where we are now. Did any of you live in Pullman in 1998? Do you remember the riot in 1998? And I'll try not to editorialize too much here, but there has been some revisionist history. Regardless of what you may read or hear, it was a riot. It flat out, it was not a street party gone wrong. It was a riot. And some official documentation is there was anywhere between 500 and 2,000 people who were participating in this riot. And they were destroying property, burning couches, burning dumpsters, breaking things left and right, stealing. It was a riot. And the reasons for it starting are mainly intoxication was a significant factor, and the crowd got stirred up into a frenzy. Well, the Pullman Police Department responded initially and realized this isn't going to work. We are outnumbered. We are getting ourselves injured. We need help. Mutual aid response goes out to all local area law enforcement agencies. In the end, approximately 100 law enforcement officers responded and tried to deal with the situation. In the stat that I had heard that there were approximately 23 police officers who were injured and went to the hospital for treatment. by the end of this riot. It was not a street party, it was a full-blown riot. And they were hit with things from bottles, bricks, rocks, manhole covers, fences, boards, anything that someone could throw at a police officer, they threw at a police officer who was standing on a line. The police department at that time was not equipped to handle a crowd that was turned riotous and violent. They were not equipped to handle it. We had some tools, but we did not have the tools that are in this bag that I brought today. The police department evaluated, the failings that we had, and we failed. Law enforcement is, our history is colorful in the fact that we generally don't learn very well until people get hurt. And then the light bulb goes off and we change and we learn and we adapt, and this is as an industry in general. And so, Pullman Police Department, we changed, we adapted, and we moved forward to do things better. So our CART team originally was part of our SWAT team. It has kind of morphed out of that specific role, and there are 6 members on the Pullman Police Department's CART team. A good way to think of them from a military standpoint, they are a force multiplier. If you had a crowd of 500 people that you needed to move, if you did not have a force multiplier, it would take you however many police officers, several hundred with sticks, batons, shields, helmets, to physically push and move this crowd out of, or to physically arrest them. And what ends up happening is you end up in pitched battle. Just like you see on TV all of the time, and in the United States, there have been a lot of disturbances gone wild in the last 4 years, specifically in the last 2.5 years. And to physically move a crowd of that size takes a lot of force and violence, unless you do something else. Tear gas, or CS, is one of those tools that law enforcement has tried to use as a force multiplier. What is CS? CS is a gas that is man-made. It's an irritant. It burns when it gets onto your skin. It's attracted to your mucous membranes, your mouth, your nose, your eyes, your ears, and the moisture there really seems to attract the CS, and it burns. It hurts. It's an irritant. You don't want to be there anymore. It causes tearing. Your nose is running. It's very annoying, and as soon as you get out of the tear gas and within 15, 20 minutes of fresh air, the effects dissipate pretty quickly and it goes away. It's, from a use of force standpoint, exposing someone to tear gas has much lower consequences as far as injuries go than if you were to hit them with a stick, telling them to get back, or in the very, very old arcane ways of people, riot response, they had dogs. They would even use horses to physically push people out of the way. There are a lot of places like New York that still actually employ horse units as part of their riot teams, and they can move around crowds, and it has a lot of useful things. I don't know if it's completely out of favor in New York at this point to use your horse to move a crowd, because there's a lot of potential dangers with that. I've been stepped on by a horse before. They're very heavy, and it hurts a lot, and you can break toes, feet, etc. So other alternatives are better. Some of our tools that we use, I'll just start pulling them out so you can see what they are. This is a riot bag that everybody at Pullman PD is issued. My riot bag currently has the good stuff from CART. And by good stuff, I mean the tools that are much more effective at dealing with crowds versus physically pushing them out of the way. a 40 millimeter launcher. And it has a flashlight so you can see who you're trying to target. It has a red dot optic, much like our rifles, so that we can accurately engage them. Holds 4 shots. It's very large. This is called an exact impact munition. This is designed to deliver a projectile out to hit a specific person who's doing something you specifically want to stop them from doing. This is not you just shoot it into the crowd. That's not what this is for. If you consider the force option of this, this is much like using a stick. Hitting someone with a stick. It's the same level of force. It creates the same injuries and has some of the same potential problems. If you were to shoot poorly and hit someone in the head with it, it potentially could be fatal. This is considered a less lethal option. It's not designed to be lethal. Someone could potentially die if it were used improperly or if something went wrong. So this is one of our options. What we would use this for in the CART team is our CART members move in and around on a riot line to assist the riot line from getting hit with beer bottles, rocks, sticks, whatever the crowd can throw at you. We can shoot more accurately and shoot farther than they can throw rocks and beer bottles. That's what this is used for on the CART team. It's to protect the police line from those people throwing things at us. That's what this thing's job is. Okay? We all wear helmets. This is a military surplus helmet. And goggles for eye protection. Everybody on our riot line, including the CART members, will have helmets. Some of them are a little bit different. Some of our CART members are cross-trained with our SWAT team, so they have a completely different helmet. But we all wear helmets because a rock, a bottle into your head, not good. Gas mask. Because CS is an irritant that doesn't care who fired it, it affects us just as much as it affects the crowd. So throughout years of training, I have been exposed to CS a lot. And you know, you go to training, you wear your stuff, or even if you're, okay, we're not going to do any direct exposures today, and then next thing you know, you have CS all over you, and your lips are burning, your skin's burning, and so it happens. And so it's an irritant is exactly what it is. It is, to my knowledge, you know, no one has ever been injured from us using CS in our trainings. And we expose ourselves to it intentionally and unintentionally all the time. But breathing it in is not recommended. I have breathed it in lots of times, and it makes you cough and gag, and it's unpleasant. So it's always better to have your gas mask. Our gas masks have a filter. That filter filters out particulates. And you can get different filters that do a variety of things. And this mask is actually rated if you were to get a nerve agent filter, much more expensive from the military. It also theoretically would filter out nerve agents. These filters will not do that. These are for CS, smoke, etc. Our gas masks for the CART team members also come with a microphone on here that's regulated because you can't talk when you have a gas mask on. So I'll give you a demonstration.
You probably can't hear me very well, but if I turn this on, then it allows us to talk on a radio. It allows us to talk to each other up close.
You can't breathe very well with one of these on, so it takes a little bit of practice. It also takes practice shooting with one of these on so that you can shoot accurately with a less lethal or potentially with a lethal weapon. I'm going to just pass the gas mask. protective equipment. Our original protective stuff literally was a lacrosse training stuff, and it has, and I still have those, knee and shin protectors. And it looks kind of funny, but extremely useful and athletic. You can still move around and do things because it has joints here. Problems with loading up with armor, whether it's plastic armor or steel armor, is that you start slowing down and losing your mobility the heavier you get. So we still wear it because it's important. A manhole cover into the shin. This would probably prevent it from breaking your leg, but it's still going to hurt. Elbow guards, pretty simple athletic stuff. I think these were to roll away. One of the more important, or not looked over items, or we try not to look over it, Kevlar gloves. The reason they are Kevlar is because the munitions I'm going to show you next, they burn at an extremely high temperature. And if we have to pick them up or move them for some reason, having a glove that does not burst into flames or melt to your skin is very useful. This is a pretty standard vest that is outfitted for our cart members. And it has a loadout of a variety of different munitions. You can see how it comes right across the front here. And we'll just go through the vest and show you what we're carrying. This is a signaling flare. And it doesn't shoot light, it basically makes noise. And so if we're giving an order to disperse, we're telling the crowd, okay, the police are here. We're telling you now that if you stay here, you will be arrested. We will shoot this into the air. It goes up about 200 feet, and it's a very loud explosion. It's kind of like a noise flash diversionary device that the SWAT team would use, but this shoots up into the air. Makes it very clear that the police are here and we intend to do something. We're getting their attention. And this is a live munition. You can still look at it though. I'll just pass it around here. And this fits into that 40 millimeter. That 40 millimeter can shoot a variety of different munitions. Something else. This is called a pocket tactical. This is a very small CS grenade. And essentially what we use a small one for versus the bigger ones when I get to the bottom here is you can use smaller ones initially. Maybe that has the effect of moving the crowd. You're not really incapacitating a crowd with CS, but it's annoying and irritating and they may not want to stick around and they leave. And this is a live grenade. It has a pin here that you would pull out just like a normal grenade. In fact, the top half of this grenade is exactly what would be put into a military high explosive grenade. The bottom half, however, is full of CS. And since it is a live grenade, I'm not going to hand it around. I'll let you guys see it. This is a larger version. This is called the tri-chamber. And essentially you can see that it has three parts of it that make it up. And what we would do is, if we threw this, it's going to break apart into three different grenades so that we can try to make a line of gas to try to move a crowd. Try to encourage them not to be somewhere that we don't want them. called a sting ball grenade. And essentially what this does is you would toss this into a crowd environment. This is a much higher use of force because we can't control it. When it goes out, it shoots a whole bunch of small rubber balls. These are used a lot in prison riots because oftentimes when a prison riot occurs, the use of force is very high and people may die pretty quickly if they don't get it under control. This is something we would use very sparingly if officers were being overrun and in danger of imminent harm. This is something that we would do to get the crowd to back away. These are called scat shells. This is launchable gas, and they're smaller, but if you put 4 in there, and if you're trying to move a crowd, and you can't get to some place that you need to put the gas, then you can launch the gas with this and have it land there. And something that's very important if we are going to deploy gas, which way is the wind blowing? If it's blowing back towards us, you have to come up with a whole new plan. Okay, we cannot move them this way. We need to move them that way. We need to work with the wind and the turbulence from buildings, etc. And so this sometimes will help us, all right, the wind is blowing this direction. We're going to put our munitions over here to move the crowd this way versus if you're just standing here and you toss something out in front of you, you can't control that wind very much. And these are launchable and they go into that 40 millimeter. So this is one of the rubber bullets that would be shot out. And this is an older variety right here. This is a 37 millimeter. We phase those out to 40 millimeter. But this is just a piece of foam. And essentially, they would be down inside of a cartridge like this. And you would shoot that out, and it's a piece of foam, and it's that less lethal impact. It's still going to hurt. Think of it as someone throwing a fast pitch baseball. It's going to hurt, and the 40 millimeter is going to have close to that change. And that way, we're only using that as very specific circumstances where the use of force dictates that we would go that high, i.e. someone is assaulting someone. So if we could hit them with a stick, then we would be able to use that same force very quickly. But this is what the foam baton looks like. So that's a variety of our tools that we use. And I use that term force multiplier because all of this gas moving out into a crowd is going to make most of the people who are participating in that crowd think about what they're doing. There are going to be people that are not going to move out of riotous crowds because they are so dedicated for whatever cause they're rioting for that day. And we have seen recently that some of the very dedicated people who are involved in certain groups that are classified as domestic terrorists now, Antifa and groups like this, they bring their own gas masks with them. They're ready to go. They bring their own armor with them. Some of them will do makeshift armor and tape books and magazines and that kind of stuff for themselves because they think of themselves as coming to do battle with the police. So those are challenges that we still have to address. But from a force multiplier standpoint, 6 CART members can make a 20-person squad on a riot line seem like you have 100 people. So it's very, very helpful, very effective. So, deployments. Our Pullman PD CART team has deployed quite a bit more recently. We have deployed to Spokane twice now to help them with the riots that occurred up there. We've deployed quite often in Pullman, and people never knew we deployed, and that was on purpose. And another part of our CART team, what we do is we set up the team as a hasty rescue team. So if there is something happening that doesn't appear it's going to get out of hand, but we don't know, we will hope for the best, plan for the worst. And so our CART team will be set up in a couple patrol cars in order to, if we need to go in and rescue someone because something happened in whatever protest was occurring, we can do that very quickly. Our CART members are also, some of them are cross-trained on the SWAT team. We've deployed, if you recall, during a protest that occurred for Black Lives Matter. It came to the Pullman Police Department, and they protested there. It was peaceful. We didn't know the intention, so our CART team was in the police department, fully geared up, ready to go, but they never saw them. They didn't know they were there. We weren't trying to intimidate them or quell their free speech rights, but hope for the best, plan for the worst. And that's some of the ways that our CART team works, is that you never even know that we were ready to go, but we were ready to go. So, does anyone have any questions about our CART team? So, recently they changed and made the use of CS gas more restrictive than it previously had been. In order for our CART team to use CS gas, it must be approved by the highest ranking elected official within the jurisdiction, is how it's phrased. So essentially, Mayor Glenn Johnson, he's the highest person in the city of Pullman's jurisdiction, so he would have to approve whether or not we could use CS gas. That's a very specific requirement that changed with some of the law enforcement reforms in the last couple years. There's also a requirement that and these are reasonable things that they made statutory, give an order announcing, hey, we're going to deploy gas if you don't leave. Give them time in order for them to leave. Don't just, we're going to shoot gas, okay, do it. Give them a little bit of time to move out. Approval from the command post, approval from the mayor or the highest elected official in order to give them every opportunity, and any innocent bystanders who do not want to participate in a CS exposure, giving them opportunities to leave. Any other questions?
No questions?
So, outside of the CART team, we also carry some of this gear in all of our patrol cars, so officers can use some of these less lethal options as far as like the direct impact rounds, and we've seen some success in that. One that I can think of was somebody was breaking windows out of RVs and cars, and when the officer arrived, he started approaching the officer with this, basically a bat, and was threatening the officer and kept on coming and kept on coming, and the officer was able to grab his less lethal and hit him with one of those impact rounds, foam baton, in the thigh. Caused a bruise, but the guy immediately laid down, gave up, and didn't want to attack us anymore. And then the other time we've seen this used, gases outside of a riot. I don't know when the last time we did that is, but I know that the SWAT team has used it at times for barricaded subjects. instead of going in and forcing an encounter, sometimes they can introduce the gas and then they'll come out.
We also used it in Citizens Academy, and
Yes.
somebody ran through it.
So Aaron, what did so thinking about the riot that took place, so what did the Pullman Police Department learn from that? I guess what are like some of the takeaways in terms of how to manage those, what you learned from it, kind of lessons learned?
Well, I was hired in '99. The riot occurred in '98. Chief was here during that time. Looking at, well, actually, he took, is that in your break? Yeah. So, some things that we took away from training standpoints is we were not prepared. We didn't train with our riot team. We didn't train with a CART team. We were unprepared for that. That's one of the things that was really taken from it. And we were under-equipped. We did not have enough gas, because they actually had a little bit of gas at that first riot, but when you throw your 2 or 3 grenades out and that's all you have and they burn out within 25 or 30 seconds, that is not enough gas to sustain a line to move a crowd out of an area. So we realized we weren't trained, we didn't have the equipment to do this, we didn't have the safety equipment. 23 police officers went to the hospital with injuries ranging from concussions, broken legs, broken bones. That incident was at the time, it was the largest single incident as far as injuries to police officers, or correction, Washington State patrol officers who came to assist us. They since have had other incidents where more people were hurt, and there have been bigger, larger riots, WTO, et cetera, like in Seattle and other incidents. But at the time, it was like, wow, we literally got our butts kicked. And that really was the biggest takeaway, is that going into it with a mindset of, we're just going to take care of this. No, you're not. No, you're not. You are unprepared, under-equipped, underfunded. You are going to have to find other ways to deal with this.
And I would add that I think we realized that in a situation like that, our police department's not big enough to handle it ourselves. And so we're going to have to rely on larger departments to come and help us out. And so a lot of our training was focused on regional tactics. So Spokane can help us out, and we know exactly how to work alongside them. Before that, there really wasn't a lot of that training provided. So I think since then, yes, tactics, training, equipment, and then just having that resources available outside of our jurisdiction.
Another significant thing that happened with that '98 riot is it changed how Pullman Police Department operated on College Hill. So Chief Weatherly had the idea, well, we are going to now do much more high visibility proactive patrols. And so there was an effort to, okay, we're going to go out and keep lawlessness and underage drinking and all of these things from blowing up into something bigger. Noise ordinances in the city of Pullman were changed. We're not going to allow parties of 500 people to overflow into the streets and just take over. Those things were changes. Also, we created 3 beat officer positions. So we dedicated 3 officers to community-oriented policing that their job was to go up and very closely focus on the student groups and the university, working with them to solve problems, getting to know everyone. You know, our College Hill officers, and we have phased back and reallocated since then, we still maintain a College Hill officer. That College Hill officer now, he knows every single fraternity president by their first name. He knows all of the people up there. People walk up to Officer Willis, hi, how are you doing? So that was a big change. You know, if you can, change the mentality and that you're not just someone to throw rocks at, that's pretty valuable itself. You know, is that as valuable or more valuable? That's a judgment call, but it's very helpful.
Any final questions or comments? Great, thank you, Commander.
Okay, I'll pick up my toys.
Okay, thanks for bringing your toys. Chief, you are next with our department update.
Okay. So first I wanted to thank everybody for helping with the feedback on the. All right. Anyway, thank you for the feedback that you provided me with on an appearance policy. Since our last meeting, I did put out an appearance policy and took many of your suggestions. And I realized that, I can't make everybody happy at the police department, but I think I did a pretty good job on this one. I think it's probably far more progressive than, what you provided me. You provided me some excellent research showing what other agencies are doing. And I think we stepped even farther than that. And I think it's probably going to be a good fit. So thank you for that. Second, I wanted to update you on grants that we've been receiving. So we're currently, halfway through a wellness grant that we received that provided us with a peer support group. So you've had a presentation on our peer support group. And so we're really trying to focus on officer wellness. And so that was one piece of it. Coming up in 2023, we'll have the opportunity to purchase a lot of fitness equipment for our officers. And so that's the second piece of our wellness is we got peer support, now we're going to do physical fitness. But I'm really excited to, with Christina's help, we were able to get another grant just recently that's going to provide cardiac screening for all of our commissioned officers and also ABLE training. ABLE is active bystandership for law enforcement, and this is a training that CJTC is really trying to get out there. And so we were able to wrap that into this wellness grant, and we were lucky enough to get it. So the goals of the ABLE training is basically to prevent harm and change the culture of policing, to prevent misconduct, avoid police mistakes, and promote officer health and wellness. And that's how we were able to leverage that into the grant. And so we will be able to have some of our officers trained as trainers in the ABLE program, and our department will be an ABLE-trained department. So that's exciting. And then finally, just a quick staffing update. So currently, we have one officer that'll be starting on December 16th. And that officer, we hope, will be going to the academy in February. We have two potential hires that we're currently doing backgrounds on. And one of them is a lateral, kind of. It's a basic law enforcement academy lateral, meaning this person graduated from a basic law enforcement academy, but doesn't have enough years in experience to come to us as a lateral officer. But if we're able to hire this person, then we can send that person to the Washington State Equivalency Academy, which is a lot shorter. It's not the full academy. It's basically if you go to an academy out of state, then you can do a shortened version of Washington Academy because somebody else taught you how to be a police officer. Now we need to teach you how to be a police officer in Washington and what our Washington laws mean. And so it's a shortened academy. So hopefully in January, maybe we'll be able to get that person into the Equivalency Academy and then into FTO. And then we have a third person in background. So if we hire all three of these people, we'll be fully staffed. And so that's great. Well, first time we'll ever make it to our 33 authorized positions filled. Unfortunately, in records, we are down 2 right now, and we need to open that up. I believe we should be advertising right now, accepting applications. And again, as you guys are aware, that's kind of a slow process. We have to accept applications, then we have to do oral boards, chief interview, then backgrounds, and then we can move on to hiring. So 2 down in records when they have 8 is pretty significant. We're also just lost a code enforcement officer. One of our code enforcement officers moved on to Whitcomb and thought that would be a better fit to be a dispatcher instead. So we're down 1 code enforcement officer. And we're currently also still down our IT position, and we're accepting applications for that. So I think that is everything I have for you today. Do you have any questions, or do you have any questions about our current events going on?
Microphone, please.
For the code enforcement, does that come from the same pool as the general police officers as well? Or is that like a separate academy, separate pool sort of thing?
That's a separate pool, and they're not required to go to an academy. They're not a commissioned officer, so they're non-commissioned. And so it's the same like as records. Turn the application in, go through oral boards, get it selected. We'll do a background investigation at that point. They'll train with the other code enforcement officers until they're ready to be on their own.
Any other questions? Do you want to talk about Citizens Academy?
Well, I'm unprepared to talk about the Citizens Academy except to say that we will be hosting another Citizens Academy this spring. I don't know the start date, but
February 2nd.
It's February 2nd? Okay. So starting February 2nd, we are currently taking applications to hold another class. So if you're interested or want or know anybody else, have them apply. And where can they find that application?
It'll be on the website tomorrow,
Okay.
the police website, yeah. Any other questions or comments for Chief? Seeing that we really don't technically have any public comment at this time, our next meeting is December 11th, and we will be talking about the Blue Bridge. Is that correct? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. We're adjourned. Have a great night, everyone.